Hey guys, welcome back. I recently found a solution of a problem which has been bothering me in all my past projects. And the problem is when I'm trying to run all my tests in parallel, so for example, in this case, if I try to run all my tests from booking tests, let's just run it and let's see the problem in action. What happens is if in this particular booking test class, let's see, we have a setup method which is trying to create a booking which is then used by all the test methods. And within this booking entity, I'm trying to log certain things. Similarly, depending on what kind of things you are testing, if it's a front-end project, you might be having some page objects, so forth and so on, right? And as we can see here, we have 4 test cases. And if I try to search for this uh, logged statement, this booking body, if I do a control F, control V, we see that we get 5 instances. One of them is this partial booking body. So actually there are 4 test cases and we have created 4 booking bodies for each of the test case. The problem is by looking at these log statements, I don't know which booking is created for which particular test case, and that's a problem. The best that I could do was I tried to print out this name of the thread, so at least I could see that this is coming for worker 1, this is for worker 2, worker 3, worker 4. But if you have, let's say, dozens of test cases or hundreds of test cases, this is not very useful, right? This does not tell you anything apart from the fact that these are for 4 different test cases. What I have always wished for is if I could somehow map in the log statements not only the name of the entity class, but if I could also map the test case for which this entity class is being called. And I'm glad to say that I recently found a solution and I'm going to share that with you. So the way I've solved this problem is I am currently using logback as my logging library. And if I open, let's say, documentation for logback, this is logback library. And if you go to its documentation, under chapter 8, it has got something called mapped diagnostic context. And basically what mapped diagnostic context or MDC does is it allows you to set certain key and value pairs that you can that will be automatically how do we say, that would be connected with the logs that you're otherwise putting in your functions or methods or test methods. So for example, here we have a logger.info statement which is check and closed, but because we have this MDC statement to publish the first and last name, we are getting the first and last name before this particular log is published, right? And this is the same concept that we're going to use with our test cases. So the way we're going to use this is, let me go back to code. Let's go to our test instance. So before we print any log statements, I want to have a way to, let's say, let's call it test context, because in some cases we might want to use it not just for the test name, but sometimes we might also want it to use for test run and other entities. So I'm going to call it test context, and instead of putting a fixed value over here, we have an option to get the actual name of the test. So it's test info, and if I now use this variable test info, then I can get the display name saying test info dot get display name. And once all the tests have finished, I could actually clear the value of MDC. So let's see if I just try to run these test cases, do I get this value of test name in front of this test classes or not. So if I click here, I could already see that, for example, the name is not yet coming. And I think I recall why, because not only we have to put this MDC statements, we also have to give the name of the particular key in the logger in the logback.xml. So if I, let's say, go back to code, let's go to logback.xml, and what I want to do is after my entity class name, I want to give the name of test context prefixed with the percentage capital X, right? And if I try to run the test again, now we should get the name of the test method in front of our entity class. So this is awesome. This is exactly what we want, right? So we have 4 instances of booking, and we know exactly which particular test case is using that particular entity or booking body which is being created in this particular case, right? One thing that I see is, for example, in this particular case, we are also getting these brackets. I'm just interested in the name, not in the bracket. So what we can do is we could replace these values. So let me say replace, and let's replace this bracket values with nothing. So let's run it again and see what we get. Click here. Perfect. So we have the name of the entity class, we have the name without the brackets, and this is good. Let's also look at some other log statements. For example, if you look at test config, well, there's nothing printed over test config, and the reason is test config is the configuration for the whole test run that is done at the environment level. And if I, for example, come to the test config class, this is run only once in the beginning, so it is not really attached to a specific test case, but for the whole test run. So actually what we can do is the place where we are calling this constructor, we can actually write some MDC statements, and we could say test context, and I could say set test environment config, right? And then I could clear this once it is done, so I don't have to mention it again. And every time this instance is called, for example, this log statement should be called. So let's say if I run it again, let's see what we get. Let's click here. Okay, so we have the name of the test case corresponding to this entity which is used inside the test, and we are setting some specific relevant tags for classes which are not really relevant for any test cases, right? This is done at the test run level, so this is good. Test run extension is also the same thing. It's run for the whole, like it's done for the whole test run. It's not related to a particular test class, so we can also fix it, but I can do it later. And the same case for DB connection. What we also see is, for example, for timing extension, we get the name of the test, but then we also say that test and the same test name took 0.538 seconds, and that was because in the past we did not know how to publish this test information for each log statements, but in this case now it is absolutely unnecessary. So I can actually go to timing extension, and I can let's see, timing extension. Yeah, we're getting the test name, so let's just go ahead and remove this particular value from here. So let's do that. It's gone. The reporting extension is still not publishing the name of the test, so we still don't know when we are publishing this result to Elastic which particular test case is mapped to which particular publish command, right? So, and the reason that is happening is because, let's open JUnit documentation, and if you go to section 5.10, we have this test lifecycle callbacks. So JUnit provides us these 6 callbacks. Before all callback and after all callback are done at the test class level before any test case is run. Before each callback, after each callback are run before a test is run, but actually you can have one more method which runs before a test case is run, and that is before test execution callback, right? And you can do something immediately after a particular test is finished and after test execution callback, and then you can have some other stuff done after each callback. Now, in the past, I never quite understood why do we need these two callbacks. Like before, we want to run something before test. Like how does it matter? I could use this and I could use this. But actually, I can show you in action a very good use case of why do we need these kind of different callbacks. So if I go back to the project, let's zoom in a little bit. I showed that, for example, where is it? Where is it? Yeah, it seems timing extension still remembers. Yes, I think that's it. Yeah, so what I was saying was, if we look into this particular test class, booking test, we are setting up the MDC in this before each method, right? And we are clearing the MDC in after each method. But since the before test execution callback and after test execution callback lives in between these methods, that is the reason why, for example, if you go to the timing extension, since timing extension implements before test execution callback and after test execution callback, when these methods are called, you see it is actually also publishing the name of the test method, right? Is it getting more clear? But if you look at the reporting extension, because this one implements the after each callback and the MDC was already clear when we came to this after each method, that is the reason why you do not see, for example, this log having the test name. So there's a very easy way to fix it, and the way we can fix it is if I go to, let's say, extension here, and instead of putting reporting extension, if I just call it as after test execution callback, and the method that we need to override is, if I do a control B, this is the method that we need to override. So instead of after each, now I'm trying to run after test execution callback, right? And what else? No, not the callback itself, sorry. The name of the method is after test execution. So this is what I have to provide here. And now if I try to run the test, we will see that the reporting extension will also contain the test name. So let's run this. Let's wait for the results. Booking is fine, test config is fine. And what we see is in the reporting extension, now we do get the name of the test method that we have set up in our booking test before each and after each methods, right? So whatever we set in our particular test class, that is now available to all of these extensions because they are implementing these callbacks, which are after test execution callback, which sits in between before each and after each methods, right? So let's go back. This also fixes the reporting extension. We can write the log for test1 extension, but before that, an important question that we want to ask is, okay, if I have now multiple test classes, so this is how I implemented it for booking test, but what if I have 50 test classes? Does it mean that I have to copy paste this line in all the 50 methods? Because, well, this line is going to be exactly the same for all the 50 test classes. And the same goes for this MDC clear statement. No, the answer is you don't have to do that. What we can do is, like other extensions, we can actually create a logging extension. So let's say if I make a copy of this class and if I paste it here, and we can now create a logging extension. And by the way, if you are new to JUnit extensions, I already have covered this in one of the previous videos. So if you look into the playlist, you should be able to find that particular video. Another thing which I forgot to mention was I'm using REST Pro project in this because I already have implemented this solution in project 0. So that's the reason I'm using REST Pro project for this particular demo. Now, In logging extension, what I want to do is, we already have, for example, here before test execution callback and after test execution callback. But actually, instead of doing this, since I want the logs to be set up at before each callback and after each callback level, I will not use this, but I will use this upper levels, right? So let's go back. Let me zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to call it before each callback, and we are going to say after each callback. And if we look into the methods that we need to implement, it's a before each method. So that's the one that we need to put here. And for after each callback, if I do a control B, the method that we need to override is or implement is after each method. So let's come down here. And of course, we don't have to implement this logic, so I will get rid of this logic. We don't need any of this logic. That was for timing extension. And what we really need is these MDC statements, which are common across tests. So if I put it here in before each method, and then I do the same for MDC clear, let me control X. Let's go to logging extension and let's put it here. We see an error, for example, in this before each method because test info is not known to this particular method, but context also contains this display information, so you can as well put context, and you have also get display name over there, and we can replace brackets to get exactly the same result. So now let's run our test again. I have removed those statements from after each and before each from within the test, and the test should still print everything as it was doing before. I can also remove this test info parameter because we don't need it anymore. And let's see. So yeah, what we see is, for example, the value is not being printed, and the reason for that is I have only created the extension so far, but we also have to register the extension. And to be able to register extensions, we have to do typically two things. Number one, you have to go inside JUnit platform properties file, and you have to give this JUnit Jupyter extensions auto detection enabled to be true. And the second thing that you have to do is you have to go to this meta in services file under resources, and you have to add this particular logging extension from its full path, right? So now if we run the test again, now it should be registered, and now we should see again the name of test, which are currently missing from all the methods or all the log statements. So let's run it again. And if I click on logs, you see that again the logs are now available. Test config, we are setting custom logs. If we go to, for example, to reporting extension, we have the name. So now we know exactly which test case was called to publish this particular result to Elastic. In the past, as you could see, it was not very useful, but now it's very useful. Same goes for timing extension. We just have to print the log, and the name for which this time is related is already printed in front of that particular class, right? So that's one thing. And I think one thing which I can also show is if we try to run all the tests, you will see that all the tests, wherever we are calling any sort of log statements, the name of the test will come. So we have one test in booking test. I have also created a unit test called CSV unit test, and I expect to see name of test in both the cases. So let's see, let it run. Let's scroll up. We will also add something in the test run extension, but for now let's look at the test. So this is fine. This is all for booking. For CSV unit test, we also get the name of the test. So for example, I created a CSV unit test over here, which by the way is a parameterized test. I'm using this data.csv file. Let me put it to split right. So we have this particular file, and we are saying this file contains 3 entries at the moment: a test name, a user ID, and access. and we have given the test name as guest user, admin user, maintenance user. These are just some dummy values and dummy names to see how to just show how a CSV parameterized test works, right? It contains a log statement which prints user ID and access, and in the parameterized test itself, typically you will not have any value. So for example, if you run a test, you will see no values. But yeah, let's just run this, because I think at this moment it is also printing some values over here. So by default, you could see it is printing the name of what is it? It is printing all the values by default, and that is because in a parameterized test, the default display name is index and arguments with values. What we are going to do instead is we will come here and Control Z. We are going to put a name where we are going to print the first name, which is test name, together with the index of that particular record, right? So if I run only the CSV test, you can already see that the name of test case is coming, in fact, as the full record, but I only want to print the name, which is the first column. So let's do it. And you can see that each particular test class is mapped to, the name of the test, which is the first column, and the right index number. So let's say if you have a big CSV file of 1,500 records, you do not have to think about where is this value coming from, because by default, when you're trying to run your test in parallel, there is no guarantee that all these records will be picked in a serial order. So as you can see here, first it picked maintenance user, then it picked the second record, and then it picked the first record. If you do multiple runs again, it can happen that it also reverses the order, or it can pick up in any random order. So having an index number helps us to identify where do I need to look back for that particular test case or that particular entry. One more thing that you can do is, if let's say you have a lot of parameterized tests, which is the case in one of my recent projects, instead of trying to copy paste this line in every single test case, you can actually create a custom annotation for it. And the way you can create a custom annotation is, we already have some custom annotations here. This was also covered in one of the previous videos. So if you have not seen it, I would advise you to go and have a look at that video. Let me copy it, paste, and let me call it as CSV test, right? And what I'm going to do is, I need the method element type method, but I in fact need annotation type as well. So we first need annotation type, and then I also need to put it on a method, because CSV annotation is put on a method, right? Let me remove any imports that we don't need. I don't need the @ tag. Instead, I need this @ parameterized test. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to replace this. We can remove this particular import, and instead of parameterized tests, let's comment this, and I'm going to use @ CSV test, right? And if I run the test again, we should get the same result, minus the fact that we have to remember to always give this name as in bracket index with the first entry, right? So this is more like cleaning up our code and giving better annotations which are less error prone. So I can remove this. Okay, I think I can also remove this thread name now, because we have more meaningful information present over here. So I don't have to provide this thread name. So let's say if I go to logger logback XML, I can get rid of this thread name, and if I run the test again, I should have more useful logs. Right, so we have the name of the class, we have the name of the test that this class is called for, and then you have the values, right? Everything else is working as expected. This is fine. Config is working fine. Test run extension. Let's also fix it. So test run extension is doing things at the run level. So let's put an MDC statement before we publish any logs. So I would say MDC put test context, and you can say test run setup. Maybe you can even say one-time test run setup, right? And we have a cache block, so maybe we can add a finally block, and we can clear it here. The closable, we also have this store closable resource, which contains this one method called close, and we can actually also put this annotation here, which says test context, test run completed, and we can clear MDC dot clear in the end, right? So if I run the test again, now we should have logs for almost everything. Okay, so this is fine. Timing extension fine. Reporting extension is giving us logs. Test config is giving us log. DB connection, the test run extension is telling us one-time test run setup is finished, started. DB connection is there. Okay, one-time test run setup. Ikari pool initialized. DB connection test run completed, and then we have test run completed. So this, we have one-to-one mapping with the right context either at the test level or at the run level, right? And now the logs have become much more meaningful and much more useful than how it was before. So long video, guys, but I hope you have learned a lot of things in this particular video, and I think we have covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover in this video. So that's it for this video. If you like the video, I'll press the like button. If you like my channel, you can subscribe to it, and I look forward to see you guys in another video. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.